Thank you so much for purchasing my pattern. Today we are going to be making the adorable diaper pouch with the 2 pockets. Ruffles are optional, and so is the D-ring, but it is just such a useful product and I am obsessed with it. I finally decided to make a video tutorial after having many people request it. So my disclaimer is that I do have 2 littles. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old currently. And so by the end of the video, you do hear them. I apologize. There were some other parts where I decided to mute the volume and I tried to do a voiceover. So I also apologize if it sounds a little funky, but as far as I know, all the instructions are there. But please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm here to help, and I hope you have fun sewing your diaper pouch. All right, you have your pattern printed out and your 2 fabric options. If you go to the last page of your pattern, you will see your measurements page. I personally choose for the main body and the gusset to be the only ones that are the outer fabric, which is what I'm doing this for the tutorial. And then everything else, I choose to do a solid color. It's completely up to personal preference. I am going to do the quilt cut because I'm quilting my outer fabric. So I'm going to do 21 by 14 inches. Then I'm going to quilt it, and then I'm going to cut it to size. So your main body piece and your gusset will both be cut from the 21 by 14. I will also be doing ruffles option B. I find it to be the easiest. So I will be cutting my main body piece at 17 by 13 and a quarter once I am done quilting. So I choose to quilt my outer fabric. Personally, I like to do 2-inch diamonds. There are many videos on the internet you can find of quilting, but a quick overview of how I do it is I take a clear ruler, and then you see this 45-degree line. I line this line up with the bottom of my fabric. And as you can see, I have a line right here and right here. Let me move the ruler there. You can see that line. And then after drawing that line, you find your 2 inches, which is, so you have 1, 2, and you line up this line with what you just drew. So if I line that up, then I would draw my next line, and you continue that until you have all of your diagonals. And then when you're done with that, you take your 45-degree line again, and you line that up with the top of your fabric. And that is how you get the other ones, or you can just flip it. There's many ways you can come up with it, but that is a personal preference. All right, I finished quilting, so then I cut mine to size. Again, I am choosing Ruffles option B. It is my personal preference, so I had to cut my main body piece at 17 and 13 and a quarter. That's because after I attach the ruffles when doing option B, I trim it to size after adding the ruffles. So no matter which option you do, the main body piece will end up being 16 and a half. It just depends on if it's before or after attaching the ruffles. And then I used that piece to also cut off my gusset piece. I used a heat pin to do my quilting. So whenever I was done, I just put my iron on low and put it over my lines and they disappear. For our handle pieces, we're going to take our fabric. I'm going to do wrong side up. You're going to fold it in half and press. Open up, fold in half again. Then we're going to, I personally choose to just use some iron-on interfacing. I'm going to cut to size. I'm going to cut it to be the 2 inches, which is what's in the middle. Then I'm going to iron it on and fold it in. I'm going to repeat that with the 3x3. I went ahead and gave them a top stitch. I go ahead and add my D-ring. Fold these to the top, align the raw edges, align them to one of the edges of your handle piece, and then you just give it a sew a couple times back and forth to make sure it stays. All right, for ruffles option B, you're going to put your fabric right side up. Then you're going to fold it in half and press. and then you are going to sew your short edges. After sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on your short edges, you're going to flip it out. You might need something to kind of poke out those edges. These edges are likely going to actually be hidden in the diaper pouch, but sewing off those raw edges just ensure that if any of them are showing, it will still look nice and neat. Flip out all your edges, and then you're going to want to press your long edge, and then set aside and repeat with your other one. After turning your fabric, go ahead and press your long folded edge. Now you're going to want to cut a piece of thread that is 6 inches longer than your ruffle piece, and you are going to put it about 1/4 of an inch from your raw edge. Then you're going to set your machine to a zigzag stitch, and you are just going to zigzag right over this piece of thread. Before you make your first stitch, make sure you have this tail left, and you do want to back stitch with this. If you can see, this piece of thread is basically right in the middle of my presser foot. Here is what your zigzag stitch should look like. You can see the thread that I just placed on there as I was sewing, and then the zigzag stitch on top. So then you are going to lay it flat, and you are going to hold the tail. Make sure it's not your zigzags. So here's my tail. I'm going to hold it as I slowly bunch the fabric up. And you do it until it is about 13 inches and 1/4. And then you are going to pin it on the top of your main outer fabric. I find it easiest to go ahead and just clip one of your edges and then start maneuvering the ruffles how you want them. You are going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both edges. After sewing your ruffle to your main outer piece, go ahead and trim as much of the raw edge as you can without hitting your seam line. This is just to make sure that your zigzags don't show when you attach the zipper. Place your main body piece right side up and lining piece number 2 on top of it with the wrong side up. You're going to create your wipes opening template by tracing your own wipes lid onto a piece of paper. You'll see here I just cut one out, and then you are going to place it like this. See how I have a center point on mine? I use that to find where I need to place it on my lining piece, which is in the instructions sheet. And then you're going to trace around that template. Once you have that traced, you're going to sew directly onto that trace line, and then you're going to cut inside. So you'll kind of see here, I just create a cut right in the middle, and then I cut around the edges as close to your seam line as possible without cutting those stitches. And then you just push your lining piece through, and you can press flat or you can just kind of maneuver it. And then I go ahead and pin it to make sure that the lining piece doesn't move, and I give it a top stitch. Here you'll want to make sure that you clip or pin your lining piece out of the way. You do not want to sew it just yet. So go ahead and just pin that top portion out of the way. Then you're going to want to flip your main body piece over so that the right side is up. If you already have a zipper that is cut and ready to go, that's fine. If not, you'll want to cut it to size. Then you're going to place it on top of your ruffles right side down, as you can see here. Then you're going to sew as close to the zipper as possible. Here you'll want to place your main body piece wrong side up and kind of fold your zipper back. Make sure your ruffles are pulled out because you do not want to sew on your ruffles. And tuck in about a 1/4 inch of your lining piece, and then you're going to sew as close to the zipper as possible. You see how my ruffles are not underneath the zipper? I pulled them out. You will have a seam line on the front of your diaper pouch, but your ruffles will cover it once we do a top stitch. Here is what your seam line should look like, but we will be covering that up with our ruffles. So now you're just going to fold down your ruffles and give them a top stitch. So now you're going to attach your zipper to side B. Side B is the side without the wipes opening holes. So go ahead and place your zipper with the wrong side up or right side down again, pin in place. And then you're going to take lining piece number 1 and pin it to the very edge of the zipper. And then you're going to sew as close to the zipper as possible. Go ahead and take that lining piece and flip it underneath the zipper. And then you're going to top stitch your ruffles. After top stitching your ruffles, you're going to flip it over. And you are going to take this lining piece, move this. You're going to take your lining piece and you are going to line it with the very edge of this zipper. And that is what will create that pocket. After you've pinned that lining up to the very top of the zipper, go ahead and flip the whole piece over. And then you're going to take your gusset. You're going to place it right side down on top of your zipper. And then again, like we did before, just take off one clip at a time to clip it in place. So what you should have is lining, zipper, gusset. And you're going to sew that as close to the zipper as possible. After sewing, here's what it should look like. You have your ruffle, zipper, gusset, and then your pocket pieces on this side so that when you open up your zipper, that'll be your pocket. So then you want to go ahead and top stitch your gusset just for a clean look. Now here's what your top stitching looks like for your gusset. Now lay this flat. We're going to flip it over. So you have this lining has been folded and it's done. You're going to flip it over to where you have your diaper wipes opening up here. And you are going to take your remaining lining piece. You're going to line it up with the edge of the zipper in place and go ahead and sew as close to the zipper as possible. After sewing your lining piece to your zipper, now you're going to take these 2 lining pieces and you are going to sew them along this edge. Don't forget to leave about a 4 to 6 inch opening in the middle. That's where you are going to turn your diaper pouch right side out. So we sewed our 2 lining pieces. And then you want to flip your entire body piece over with your wipes at the top. And here's your zipper piece. You are going to pick up your gusset. You are going to fold it and all the way until it meets the zipper's edge. Then you are going to pin and sew along the line so that it's the zipper, which is already sewn to a piece of lining, and it's going to be sewn to your gusset. After sewing your gusset to that end of the zipper, now you are going to kind of bend it open, and this zipper you're going to go ahead and open up. And flip the whole piece inside out so that it will open up the diaper pouch portion, you are going to top stitch your gusset. And don't forget that you will see this part of your pocket, so make sure you use the thread color in your bobbin, because this will show when you open up your zipper. Now, both sides of your gusset should have top stitches. Now you're going to put in your zipper pulls. After attaching your zipper pulls, go ahead and carefully turn your bag inside out. So I just stick my hand all the way through and I just slowly pull. Just make sure your zippers stay on. You have your main body piece and your lining, and it's all inside out. So you're going to want to match the center of your main body piece with the center of your gusset. So the way I do it is I match up my zippers, I pull, and I find, so that's my center piece. Just going to grab it. I'm going to bring it all the way to the center of my gusset. I'm just going to pin it in place. And pin your other side down. Sometimes I double check. Yep. So now you have your main body piece pinned down on either side, and then you're going to flip over. Find the center of each lining of each pocket. So that's a lot easier, because if you just lift it straight up, here's your center. So as you can see, you have these two flaps, which you will end up sewing together, but you have found the center of your lining piece and you've matched it up with the zipper. You go ahead and pin around however much you need to. You're going to turn this flap. And then the side with the diaper wipes hole, which is right here, the side with the wipes hole is definitely harder to do the center. You're just going to have to kind of finagle it. But you already know where the center is because it's where you have sewn the two pieces together. You're just going to take that center and make sure that it lines up with, you're just going to find the center and make sure that it lines up with the zipper, and then go ahead and pin. Again, you're just going to have to kind of finagle all of your pieces to where it fits. It's okay if your lining doesn't go all the way to the edge. As long as it's pretty close, it all works out. Okay, so let's check. What we should have is we have our main body piece. We have our lining. They're in two separate flaps right now. We have our lining that has the wipes hole. Those are two separate flaps right now. And then your main body piece. You are going to sew through the main body piece and the lining all the way until you pass this first zipper. So you can see the zipper right here. You're going to sew all the way until you just pass the zipper. That's what we have. So far, you see I sewed them together all the way to where the end of the zipper is, and then we're leaving this flap out for now. Okay, so you're going to move that flap over, just pin it out of the way, and repeat with your other three edges. So before we go on to our next step, let's pause to make sure that we are all on the same page. So we have a seam line that goes through the main body piece and the lining all the way up to this zipper. And then you have this flap, this lining flap we haven't done anything with yet. Fold it over. We have our gusset, and there's still a hole there. We're about to sew it. There's still a spot, where the gusset isn't attached. And then we have another flap that we haven't sewn yet. See, the edges are still raw. There's no sew. And then this edge piece. So our zippers are sewn and our edges are sewn, but we have these two flap pieces and we have our gusset. So now we're going to pin these lining pieces out of the way, and we are going to sew just right here. You can kind of see the seam line right there. And we're just going to sew back and forth so that the gusset is now attached to the main body piece. All right, with our lining pieces, our lining flaps pinned out of the way, we're just going to sew the gusset down right here in the middle. Sewn. Now we're going to do it on the other side right here. We're going to unclip these lining panels, and we are going to move everything out of the way, and we're just going to sew those up until we meet the original seam line. You're going to do that for all, so there's 2 panels, and you're going to do it for all 4 raw edges. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So just to see closer up, see, this is the one that I just did, and it just comes right up to that other seam line. Well, here's whenever it's flat, sorry. See how it goes right up to that seam line and right up to that seam line, but it's still separate. Okay, so again, we have, here's your main body piece. This should be on the bottom. Here's your wipes opening. These are sewn together. You have a flap, another flap, and then these are sewn together. Now these 2 flaps in the middle, these are the ones that we are going to cut an inch and a half squares out of these corners. And you're going to do it from the stitch line. So from here to here should be an inch and a half. Now your 2 panels should have little squares cut out of them. Then what you're going to do is you're going to grab each edge. So here's your square. I'm going to grab the edges. I'm going to pull open till it meets, just like this. This part is definitely another part you just have to kind of work with. It's kind of hard, but you're going to do that with all 4 sides. So again, you're going to open till it meets, and then you're going to sew across right there. Okay, you're looking like Frankenstein, but it's going to be okay. We are going to find our hole. We've boxed our inside panels, right? There should be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you're going to pull everything through this hole. This is going to take a minute. So, once you have it all pulled out, it's going to still be flat, but we're going to box our outside corner. I'm going to do 1 3/4. 1 quarter. Oh, I got my bucket. So to do your edges, you are going to pick up your corners. I'm just going to open them and align this seam with right in the middle. You're going to sew across, and don't worry about the raw edge. We're going to hide it. I choose to put my handle on the side where the zippers open. So I am just going to take the raw end of my handle, the raw edge of my handle, and I am going to slip it in between this piece of outer fabric and this lining. And then that just makes sure your raw edges are completely hidden. So I'm just going to slip it right in there and then sew across. And then I do the same thing on this side over here. All right, we have sewn our corners. Whenever you do the second side of the strap, you do have to do it in 2 separate stitches because this will not go through the sewing machine unless I'm missing something, but it'll still meet up as long as you do it from here down and then from here down. And then we are going to trim our excess. We're going to trim as close to the seam as possible without cutting the seam. To trimming your edges, now you are just going to kind of fold them in. Going to find your corners on the inside, and you're just going to fold them in just enough so that it covers those raw edges. So I do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you just sew along these corners from the inside just like this, and then whenever it comes out, it will hide your raw edges. So after you sew those seams, your inside will look something like this, but it just folds right in, and that's just called a French seam. And then your very last step will be to go ahead and close the hole. I just do a top stitch as close as possible to that opening. And then you have your adorable diaper bag.